Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We are presented by The Athletic and CLNS Media. Today on the show, I'm excited. We have a really fun guest. We're going to get some really great stories about, scouting around the NBA and with some of the ways that, this person is teaching the new school of scouts to join the NBA. It's Pete Philo. He runs the TPG Sports program now. Formerly, he's been a scout for a long time. He scouted for the Mavericks, scouted for the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Indiana Pacers. He has done a billion things in the basketball world, and I think he's going to be a really fun guest for us to talk to, just given some of the great experiences he's had over the last 2 decades. Pete, how's it going, man?
Sam, thanks for having me. That intro was great, but I feel old now.
No reason to feel old, just experience. You have a wealth of experience and a wealth of knowledge to share with all of us here.
I'll take that. Okay.
So, Pete, I want to just kind of give you the floor here to kind of give the rundown on how you got into the positions that you are, and then we'll move into what you're talking about and what you're doing now after. But before we do that, I just kind of want to get the full story on how Pete Philo ended up, as an international scout for the Mavericks and, moving up from where he was to there.
Sure. It's luck and timing, like anything in life, and I'm very aware of that.
It always is, man.
I played. Yeah, it really is. And I'm fortunate. I've been around some really good people and great advisors and mentors, and without those people, it's hard to do anything really big in life. And so I played basketball. I played Division I basketball at Manhattan College for Fran Fraschilla, and then I played at South Alabama for Bill Musselman, and I went overseas, and I was fortunate enough to play about 6.5 years professionally. And what was good for my career is that I played in a bunch of different countries, and I've developed a lot of relationships around the world. What was bad for my career is that I had a different contract every year, and I was bouncing around, so I didn't have a lot of stability. But nonetheless, I look back, and it was a great, wonderful experience. Towards the end of my basketball playing days, Donnie Nelson and I had developed a little bit of a relationship with the Mavs. Over the summer, I was playing a lot of pickup ball with their pros down in American Airlines Center in Dallas, and Donnie and I developed a little bit of a relationship. And then towards the end of my career, he was looking for another talent evaluator that not just knew players in Europe, but had relationships. Because international basketball, it's not really about identifying the talent. I mean, the scouts over there are going to all the U18s, U20s, the U19 Worlds, and they're at every event, and they have relationships everywhere. It's really about knowing some people where you can get information and get it quickly. Contract information, health information, background stuff on players, what makes them tick internally. And those, you can't get that information unless you have real relationships with coaches and general managers and maybe some media and different folks in every country, every basketball playing country, let's say. And so I had many of those rather, and that helped me out tremendously getting my start. And from there, I had an opportunity to be with Dallas for a few years, and simultaneously, this is where the luck really came in. Simultaneously, Reebok was looking for someone that knew the international landscape and could identify and endorse athletes before the competitors like Nike and Adidas and Under Armour before they did. And so, I flew up to Boston and met with the folks at Reebok, and they gave me an opportunity. And simultaneously to that, they were also looking for something else grassroots-wise to get their arms around and maybe develop. And I saw a need, I saw a problem that could be solved, and maybe we'll get into a little bit later about problem solving. That's how we kind of turn back into a lot of our decisions at TPG Sports Group. We try to identify a problem and then solve it. And that's pretty much been the backbone of our success. But the problem that I saw with international basketball at the time, this is 2003, Sam, was that the NBA pre-draft camp at the time was in Chicago. Then it went to Orlando and back to Chicago. But what I saw was that the very few international players that were coming over felt very, very much out of place. And there were a few. I'll never forget seeing Marcin Gortat run up and down the floor. And not that he needed the ball, but he was never put in pick and roll situations. He was never really put in any healthy situation where he could do what he does. Now, he could always run and he could protect a little bit. His pick and roll coverages were good, but he felt out of sync, I guess, a little bit. And I said to myself, we should be putting something together for the international players that makes them feel a little more comfortable. Maybe it's here in the States. Maybe it's alongside Chicago. But nonetheless, we were able to get it done and get the sanction from the league, and brought a bunch of NBA coaches over. And without getting too winded with this answer, 9 years of running the camp, we had 82 players drafted in the NBA. And the camp still exists, of course, and I'm a fan from afar. But it was time for me to move on to different things after 9 years of it. And really thankful for that time, though. I mean, you look back and the staffs that we had from, Donnie Nelson, Dennis Lindsey, who's the GM of Utah, Kevin Pritchard's the president of the Pacers, and Tony Ronzoni and Bill Bano and Jack Sikma. We had a great group of Fran Fraschilla, who I brought in as well. And so 9 years of that, Sam, and then that I was able to put my work in front of a lot of teams, and then from there, trust was developed, and I was offered some different deals, and I moved on to Minnesota and Indiana.
Yeah, and for people who don't know, like, Pete was the director of scouting in Minnesota. He was the director of international scouting in Indiana. For those who are unaware, can you kind of explain what those positions entail and what exactly your responsibilities are, where exactly you fall kind of in the hierarchy of the front offices whenever you are, tasked with those positions?
Sure. So there's the way a hierarchy goes, Sam, is you have your general manager and or president. Those are usually one and the same. Sometimes the hierarchy goes president, then general manager, then assistant GM, and then you have your directors. And a lot of times it's director of scouting, director of international scouting, director of player personnel, sometimes director of pro personnel. And underneath that, you usually have some regional guys. And those guys are usually college scouts. You have your advanced scout in there. You also have maybe an additional pro personnel guy. I know some teams are shifting a little bit that way because it's really important. It's hard for one guy to cover the entire league and cover it, the right way. And I agree with that. I love that model. It's always been in favor of that. But for me as a director, I had to manage a staff, manage a budget, manage schedules, and I've always been the type that I'd like all our regional guys to create their own schedule. It's good practice of being efficient and trying to figure out the right amount of coverage. I mean, we can get in deep into this if you'd like as well, but I tell you what, Sam, even just putting a schedule together for scouting is challenging, because if you take the calendar year and you talk about when guys start practice in November or October and go through March, essentially, some guys, the season's over at that point, except for a very few amount of teams that are going on to the NCAA tournament even deeper. But it's a very short window, and to maximize coverage, you have to have schedules done properly. And you may miss a guy because of an injury or because something happened on the team, and are you going to be able to go back and see him another time? So in terms of schedules and responsibilities, that's a big part of it. And then, managing meetings, making sure our guys are prepared for everything, giving certain guys assignments outside of your normal duties of evaluating talent and collecting background information. Collecting background information is essential in scouting. It's really probably the biggest part, and it hurts to say it, but it's just true. Talent evaluation is one thing, but right now, scouts are leaned heavily on to get as much background intel on players as possible, because that's what, the GM is going to make the final decision on the player's talent, and it is what it is. But you see scouts getting hired now because they have relationships with college coaches.
Yeah.
And they can get the information quicker than a guy that just may be able to evaluate talent but doesn't have those relationships. So that's a big part of it, and giving scouts different assignments to, take on, let's say, 5 players in their region and get things done by January 1st so that we can start the funnel system and get things ranked, in an appropriate manner.
I think that you bring up the background part of this equation here. And, when I started doing this, on a full-time basis, like 3-4 years ago or whatever, that was the part of it that I think struck me the most, just how detailed this thing gets on background information and just how essential it is to the entire scouting process. Because from the outside, I think you can kind of fall into the trap of, X player is better than Y player. Why wouldn't you take this guy? This guy has a better ceiling. This guy has a better, body to grow into. And I feel like, it's really essential to kind of just continue to impart upon my listeners and to people that, the background information portion is absolutely essential to doing scouting and absolutely essential to doing, this job in an even relatively coherent manner, because, everyone knows that this job is not exactly an exact science. I mean, whenever you have all of these different players who develop at different paces and, different skill sets that you're trying to find and match into a certain puzzle that is a roster, this thing is never going to go according to plan, and it's never going to be simple. But the background information portion of it, gathering everything that you can on a single player, I mean, it really does just make the difference from, finding a diamond in the rough to finding a bust, given the fact that we know how important development curves are now that we're drafting younger and younger seemingly every year, where you're getting 19-year-old kids as being, not the average age of entry, but, maybe there are probably twice as many 19-year-old kids that are drafted now than there were 7 or 8 years ago.
Sure, no question. It's interesting because years ago when I was in Minnesota, and Kevin McHale and Jim Stack were our president and general manager, or GM and assistant GM, and they always said there's a difference between information and good information. Mm-hmm. Guys that can get information. Well, if I call, Danny Manning and somebody else calls Danny Manning at Wake Forest that may have never met him, who's Danny going to get better information to? Yep. Probably me if I have a relationship with Danny. It's just how life works. There was a trust there. And so what we used to do, to the best of our ability anyway, was to divide our scouts into groups of good information. And so take 5 prospects, and who knows the coaches better than the other scouts? Well, that scout's getting those 5 players. And that's how we would do it, just so we made sure we were getting good information and not just information.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great way to do it. So you're in Minnesota for what, I believe 8 or 9 years?
7.
Something like that? 7 years?
Yeah.
Your time or kind of overlapped with David Kahn's time, and you and I have talked about David extensively whenever you and I kind of worked together on doing the Tanguy and Gumbo story. And I think that from what you told me, David obviously has a certain reputation, and I would like to just kind of give you the floor to talk about what your experiences were working with David Kahn, because David he's a fascinating figure in basketball for a whole lot of reasons, I think.
Well, fascinating, I will agree with that, but I will say this, and you can take fascinating in a million different ways, but David, what I loved about David was that he let me work. He didn't micromanage me. It was a deal where he knew I had a lot of relationships and I was hardworking, mm-hmm. and I liked to travel at the time, not anymore. But and so I was always on the hunt for information, and he didn't restrict me in any way. He's very smart, and listen, that job is not easy. It's the best GM sure. in the NBA will tell you. It is not easy, and you're really only as good as the people are around you. And I don't know. I can't say that everything that he did or that we did was perfect. Then I can also say there were some things that we did really, really well. And I think like anything, if you ask Pat Riley if he could do some things differently the last 10 years, of course he's going to say yes. And there's probably some things he would like to do differently. And David probably would admit the same thing. We gave our head coaches a lot of say at times, and not sure if that was good or bad, because you want them involved in everything, Mm-hmm. But if one is able to make a decision and kind of override David, which I don't know necessarily happened, but there's so many factors that are involved in a final decision. But I will say I did like working for David. I have no problems with him at all. And I hope he's doing well. I haven't heard from him in a while, but all is good.
Yeah, no, I think that he's just an interesting subject because I think he has this public persona as a very peculiar human being who also wasn't smart due to the fact that the team just didn't win while he was there. And I think that Sure. The lack of intelligence is an unfair statement because you cannot rise to that position coming from where he came from, at least, given his background, unless you're an intelligent human being. And I always find it interesting to talk to people that were on the inside of that front office just because it's obviously not just a simple matter of this guy, fucked up all the time. And it's at least good to hear a bit of a different side of the story from you, who worked with him day in and day out.
Yeah, don't forget there's an ownership component too.
Yep.
And I love Glenn Taylor, by the way. Glenn Taylor is a fantastic human being. He's one of the nicest men I've ever met. But David also has to take every deal to the owner, and he's not going to publicly say that he couldn't do a deal or he had to do a deal because of ownership. And I'm not saying that happened, but that does happen. And so, I'll give one example that I do know that was close to happening is when we had the second pick and we ended up taking Derek Williams. Mm-hmm. Our room was split right in half. I like Derek as a talent, but I did not want Derek. And not that I didn't want him at 2. I thought he'd be a rotation guy, starter at best. I did not see him as an all-star. Mm-hmm. And I kind of wanted to trade the pick. And that was vetoed basically. And so I don't know if, some of that stuff comes into play and some of it was probably out of David's control.
Yeah. So you handled a lot of the international scouting. I think it's interesting to kind of talk about what might be the most important international draft pick that happened during that time in Minnesota. It's obviously Ricky Rubio. What do you remember from doing the background research on Ricky Rubio?
Well, to interject really quickly before Rubio, I would say Pekovic may have been a better pick because he was picked in the second round.
That I would agree with, yeah. But in terms of importance, though...
Ricky was an easy one.
Yeah.
30 teams passed on Peck. So,
well, let's talk about them both,
though. To me, sure. Pekovic is such a big, burly, strong, almost scary-looking guy, but you want to talk about just a big teddy bear. Wonderful human being. I feel so bad that he got hurt and injured, and he's no longer playing because he was a good starter in the NBA, and he was a very smart basketball player too. He's always in the right place at the right time. He was a winner, and it was easy doing background on Peck. Peck stayed in his lane, did what he had to do. He didn't really have a lot of hobbies. He was in the gym and he went home. I mean, he didn't do a lot. Ricky's situation was a little more complicated, not from a background standpoint in a negative way at all, because he's a super guy, big time family guy, really likable, really great with kids and great with fans. But he had a contract situation, and that wasn't easy to navigate through. And there's a lot to it that I'd rather not say too much, but there was just a lot to it. And he had a buyout, and then he switched teams, and he went to Barcelona, and then more people are involved. And then we knew when we drafted him, though, that he was not coming over. And that was David got killed on that one because we drafted 2 point guards. But we knew Ricky wasn't coming over. And I don't know if David said that, Johnny and Ricky could play together because he really thought it, or because he, one was going to be there and one was not for a couple of years. But nonetheless, Ricky was not coming over for 2 years. We knew it, and we just then had to foster the relationship. I spent a lot of time over there with him and his family, and got to know them a little closer. And they're all just great people. And we're just hoping Ricky would come through on his word. After 2 years, he would come over, and he did. Of course, it wasn't without a little pushback from Barcelona and some different teams that wanted him to stay. But nonetheless, he came over, and the rest is history. He's been a nice player.
Yeah, I think he's pretty clearly to me like a top 20 point guard in the NBA. Whenever you kind of factor in the fact that he was such an incredible defender at this stage. Obviously one of the best passers in the NBA. The jump shooting and the finishing at the rim has kind of hindered him from taking that leap to all-star level. But,
Sure.
There's nothing wrong with being a top 20 point guard in the NBA and getting that at pick number 5, I don't think. You mentioned the idea of contracts, and I don't want to talk about Ricky Rubio specifically in this scenario, so we can kind of talk about it in the abstract. But whenever you're trying to figure out, what an international prospect's contract looks like, how do you kind of go about getting that information? And then once you get that information, how do you go about kind of parsing through it and deciding, okay, is it worth stashing this guy for 2 years while his contract ends? Should we try and buy him out? Just kind of go through that entire process.
Sure. So it's really about trusting relationships. If you don't have someone on the inside or that can get to somebody on the inside to get your hands on that contract, then you're way behind. And so that's really where my value came in for many years. Having, while you camp, a lot of the general managers and coaches and agents are trying to get their players into the camp for global exposure, not just to get drafted, but to raise their awareness globally so that their, contracted or their player is worth more so that they can play the buy and sell game. Because in Europe or internationally, the buy and sell game is legal, where here it's not legal. College players are college players. They're not under contract. They're playing basketball for a university. Over there at 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, they have a pro contract, and that contract has a buyout, and it's all legal. And, they will sell a player for X amount of dollars after a certain amount of time for an investment. It's like an investment, basically. So they're an asset. And so a lot of times the agent will have all the information you need. If you have an agent that, let's say, is trying to do business with one NBA team or prefers the player to go to one NBA team or maybe does not want him to go to your team for whatever reason, and typically it's usually in your draft position. If we don't have a first-round pick and we're telling the agent we want all the information and the player's a lottery player, he may be hesitant to give us that information. We then have to play the game of, well, there's a good chance we're going to be in the first round with a trade, and we may be staring at him, and we'd like to have all the information. Well, I don't believe you. I'm not giving you the information. There's so much cat and mouse to it. And so, again, where relationships come in, Sam, is, well, maybe I have to go around the agent and go directly to the club. Well, who do I know at the club? I hope I know the GM or the coach or assistant GM, somebody that is in that club that can give me the information. And so it gets really challenging, even for myself at times, where I have so many relationships over there, but sometimes it's I may be friends with a federation guy, but I don't know the GM at Polartez or something, for example, and I ask the federation guy to help me out, and then he puts me in front of him, and the rest is history. But at that point, you have to navigate the buyout, and the NBA has a max that they can pay for the buyout. And I'm a couple of years removed now, and I believe it recently changed. It's probably, $650,000-$700,000 now?
I believe it's $650,000, yeah, if I remember correctly.
Okay, so let's just say, right, for discussion purposes, it's $650,000. The NBA is allowed to pay up to that. Over that amount, it has to come out of the player's pocket. And that player is evaluating what he's going to make in the NBA with, of course, taxed. And he's got to figure out what his net is and how how he can possibly stagger these payments to pay off his buyout. If his buyout's very large, he may not want to come over to the NBA now or get drafted in a certain range. Mm-hmm. And then as an NBA team, we have to evaluate. You evaluate in buckets, and this is really helpful. It's helpful for listeners, helpful for younger scouts that are trying to be executives. Always evaluate in the buckets of all-star, starter, rotation, and fringe. It gives you a little bit of a value add as well in terms of what player you're scouting. And if you're a player that you've drafted in the second round and you know he's staying over there, but you're trying to get through the buyout situation, well, that second round pick, do you think he's going to be in your rotation one day? If you do, then you're figuring out everything you can to make sure the player is educated on what he will have to pay in terms of his buyout. But it gets challenging because the player, if he's that good of a player, he's probably going to be offered a significant amount of money for one of the main clubs in Europe. And a lot of times players are taking less money to come to the NBA in hopes that they will get a second contract that is worth a lot more.
Mm-hmm. So you bring up the idea of finances as well in Europe, and one agent, a few of them have told me, more than just one, that they have like a certain mathematical equation when comparing US dollars to European dollars. In your experience, what is the difference in terms of what players make overseas as compared to what they make in America? And I don't just mean from a salary perspective. I mean from taxes, benefits such as living spaces and cars that they get, kind of everything that gets thrown into the mix there.
Sure. So typically an international player will have his local taxes paid by the club, and he will receive an apartment or a condo, and they will also receive a car. And then most of the time, the players we're talking about mm-hmm. are getting meals per day at a local restaurant or a few different local restaurants that are associated with the club as sponsors or partners. So doing all the math on that, over here you don't get any of that except salary. You may have a few perks here at the restaurants, but these restaurants want to charge you. Mm-hmm. Yep. A lot of the time. You may get a freebie here and there, but it's not your everyday where you can actually put into an equation of a year-long situation or 8-9 months. So once you do all that, and as well as the dollar versus the euro, where it currently is, and I believe the dollar has gotten stronger, over time. But 4 or 5 years ago, or let's say 8 years ago, when we were doing the Pekovic situation, the dollar was awful, mm-hmm. and so it changes daily. But overall, I think it's an important piece for when a player's making a decision, and you just hope that you're on the favorable end where you can explain to them when they absorb what the real big picture is over here in the NBA, and that is, of course, really your second contract. And money's, as we all know right now, is pretty significant around the NBA. Backup point guard is making between $5 and $8 million.
Yeah.
So it's pretty significant. And then there's players like Sergio Llull that just prefer to stay in Spain. They like the lifestyle. They're comfortable there. I mean, Sergio Llull's a for sure rotation guy in the NBA.
Yeah, like he would get like a $10 million contract a year in the NBA.
Absolutely. Yep.
So I have two more questions here, and then we're going to move into what you're doing now, because I find what you're doing now very interesting. The first one I want to ask you about is, I was talking with Gary Parrish and Pablo Torre online on Twitter earlier, and Parrish started sharing a couple of Michael Beasley stories that he has. One from a college coach that he was told was, Michael Beasley apparently let out like 100 frogs in his high school and just like had them like hopping all over the hallways and everything. What is your best Michael Beasley story? Because you guys traded for Michael Beasley during your time in Minnesota.
We did, and that trade was a pretty simple trade. I believe the team we got him from was paying his salary while we had him due to a certain structure, but it was almost a free look at at that point.
Yeah.
I don't have necessarily a funny story to share about Bees, because I'm on the road, don't forget, 200-something days a year, so I wasn't around the team a lot, but I was around, obviously, enough to get a feel. And, interesting thing about Michael was that, Michael, as we all know, is super, super talented and has the ability to score or get a shot. And that's an ability in itself if you can just get your own shot.
Yep.
And at 6'9", left-handed, huge hands, he could finish and do different things. Now, it wasn't always consistent. And we had our analytics department put together a really interesting report, and it had to do with Michael and finishing a play, not necessarily as a score, but finishing a play in a positive way, whether it's a positive pass, a positive finish, an open shot, a non-contested shot, even a good decision, even a ball movement where it maybe didn't lead to a score versus a negative outcome, which would be a turnover, a bad shot, a bad decision, a poor read. And we found that with 2 or less dribbles, Michael was the number 1 small forward in the NBA. With 3 or more dribbles, he was the worst small forward in the NBA. And we put this on a board in front of him, or on paper. I don't exactly remember, so many years ago now. I think it was on a whiteboard, and he was blown away. And he was so proud, though, that he saw his name above everyone. You know the names. But it was a teaching moment for everyone. It was a teaching moment for our coaches as well, where they could start to use him in smaller pinch areas, maybe have him catch on an elbow or just off the elbow, where he'd face and do his business with 1 or 2 dribbles, because the guy is unguardable with 1 or 2 dribbles if he stays within his lane, I guess. But he starts doing a little bit too much dribbling, and he gets himself into some trouble. And I don't know if that's a brain type. I don't know if that's a focus. I don't know if it's just he cares so much that he wants to do so much. I don't know. Not smart enough for that, but I do know that he really enjoyed the exercise, and I think it helped him. It helped in small spurts, but you're at the mercy of your coaching staff sometimes as well, and Michael's got to make decisions on the court that are good for him and good for the team. So I wish him well, but I will say this: I enjoyed being around him. There's you name it out there on Michael, good, bad, and the ugly, and I enjoyed my time with him. He is actually a kind young man.
Yeah, no, I think that's what everyone who has been around him has said. Like, I have not been around Michael Beasley a lot, but everyone who has spent a lot of time with him just says that he is a very kind soul, a very warm, genuine kind of aura about him. And, he's still only 28 years old is what's crazy. It feels like he's been in the NBA.
Very giving, too. Exactly. He's only 28. Very giving. We were in London playing, I don't know, the Lakers or the Celtics. It was the preseason deal went over, and in the lobby, and we didn't really know each other that well. A couple of our scouts were there, and he was ordering some food, and he looked over to me and said, "Hey, do you want something?" I'm telling you, he barely knew me, and I was like, "No, I'm all right." He's like, "No, let me buy you something," and it's just who he is. I think he's a giver,
The second question I have for you here is: you were in Dallas during the Pavel Podkolzine selection in 2004 when the Mavericks decided to take this 7'5" big Russian center that I believe played 1 game for Dallas, right? Like, he played the last game of the year, if I remember correctly.
Probably.
Really, he was a guy that, if I remember correctly, in 2003, everyone had him super high on draft boards. He was potential top 10 pick in X, Y, and Z. And then he gets diagnosed with a pituitary thing or something like that, and
Correct.
Ends up kind of falling in the draft. What do you remember about the Pavel Podkolzine era? Because I'm sure that being an international scout, you probably had some sort of role in, doing the research in the background on him at that stage.
I was nowhere near that pick. I'm just kidding. The good news is that I can be off the hook because I don't make the final decision there.
Right.
I'm kidding again.
You were low-level international scout. You're fine on this one.
Exactly. I was an absolute nobody. But we all know this. I mean, the pioneer of international basketball is Donnie Nelson.
Uh-huh.
There's nobody better. I was fortunate to learn from Donnie. He's one of my mentors. The guy is brilliant. He knows everyone over there. He was opening up his doors to all types of international people over the years for the global games and different things. And he was a coach of Lithuania. The guy is a great man and great talent evaluator. So Pavel, we had Pavel at the Euro camp, and Pavel that year is draft year. We did a really fun exercise of having 10 7-footers on the floor, and we played 5-on-5. And
that's amazing.
Someone had to be
foremost.
Someone had to be. The old scouts will remind you of this. They all remember this day. Someone had to be the point guard. So Pavel was really adamant, raising his hand. He wanted to be the point guard. And let me tell you something. Pavel did a great job. Now, there's 5 7-footers on your team. Handled the ball, passed it, showed leadership. Now you don't draft him for that, but
right.
But what we did see was a huge care factor. He was obviously a gigantic person, a very big man that loved people, worked hard, played hard. You know, he wasn't an NBA player, but at the time evaluating the draft, we did not want him high in the draft. That wasn't our agenda. In fact, do you have the pick in front of you? I want to say it was 18 or 22.
21, it looks like, now that I'm looking at it.
21. Okay, so when you evaluate the draft, NBA All-Stars are 1 through 3 typically. Starters are 4 through, depending on the draft, possibly 4 through 12, 13, 14. After that, 15 to, you hope through 30 are rotation guys. Getting a guy at 21 that's 7'6", that just has a lot of potential. Now, I don't remember who else was in that draft that we could have had. I don't have it in front of me. I'm sure you could educate me really quick.
Here, let me look.
But you evaluate that one as a potential starter, but you feel comfortable he's going to be a rotation player. And then you roll the dice. I don't think it was a huge risk. It's a guaranteed contract, of course, in the first round, but as long as we weren't drafting him in the starter range, I felt comfortable.
Okay, so the centers, we'll just say pure centers, who were selected after Pavel Podkolzine. David Harrison, didn't really have much of a career in the NBA. Right. Anderson Varejao, long-time career, excellent pick by, I believe, he was traded to Cleveland, I think. Was selected.
And I believe he was in the 30s, correct?
He was 30. Yeah, he was the first pick of the second
round.
He was
first pick in the second, and the reason for that because of his contract.
Right.
No one was going to take him in the first round because of the buyout and everything else. Okay.
So Jackson Vroman, Peter John Ramos, Ha-Seong Jin are your other centers that were selected. The other ones who at least played in the NBA: Pero Antic, John Edwards, Hamed Haddadi, and Jared Reiner. So really, there was a 1 in 8 or 9 chance that you were going to get anything worthwhile there. Why not take a shot on Pavel Podkolzine?
Exactly. Perfect.
So let's talk about what you're doing now. What you're doing now is you are the, I want to say, CEO of TPG Sports Group, the founder and CEO, right?
Sure. Janitor, whatever. Doesn't matter.
Oh, man. So kind of tell the people what you do at TPG Sports Group.
So we basically, our slogan is educating the industry leaders of tomorrow. What we love to put together events and curriculums that teach, educate, and connect people. And for us, we've had a lot of success at that, and we're going to continue doing it at this level, and then we'll continue to grow. Our 3 events currently are our Pro Scout School, which is in Las Vegas during the NBA time of the NBA Summer League, where we bring in a bunch of NBA coaches, scouts, executives, general managers, assistant GMs, analytics guys, video coordinators, you name it. We bring in every level we can to have a live event, and we have panel discussions on day one. On day two, we have breakout rooms, which are really unique because it's more of an intimate setting. We break the entire conference into a third, and we have 3 groups rotating where there can be more interaction, more questions asked, more demonstrations. It's a lot of fun, and that thing has gotten really popular and has grown, and we've helped so many people. And you can't help everybody, obviously, but as long as people are learning and then people are connecting and meeting people, we've had several people become NBA scouts out of it, become scouts in college, internationally. And some come and realize, oh, this isn't for me, but that helps them ultimately, in their career. And then we launched Virtual Scout School a couple of weeks ago. And this was the reason we launched virtual. Over the last 4 years of running Pro Scout School, a live event, we often got many requests around the world, as well as domestically in the United States, about the ability to learn online and having a platform online because they couldn't make it to Vegas for whatever reason. It may be schedule, it may be financial. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a commitment to come out to Vegas. There's a financial commitment there, from hotel, flight, cost of the event and that sort of thing. And so we wanted to put this together, this platform called Virtual Scout School, and the website's virtualscoutschool.com, or you can access it through our TPG Sports Group website, where we have 12 months of content at a very, very affordable price. We price this so that it's almost a way of us giving back. So anyone can access it from China to Lithuania to Brazil to New Jersey, and at $9.99 a month, $9.99 a month. You're going to get information that covers every aspect of basketball, from talent evaluation to game prep to salary cap stuff. That's a hot topic right now with all the salary cap information. Agents and power, draft room and draft week, player development, the internal makeup of a player. We do talk about organizational cultures. We're going to give career advice. There's a lot involved with Virtual Scout School, and we launched a couple weeks ago. Our first month is October 1st, coming up in another week or so. You can subscribe at any time throughout the program, but we do encourage those to start on the October one, because the way we set it up, Sam, is to it's in somewhat of an order that makes sense for the global calendar, and the first month is before you can evaluate, and that. Mm-hmm. In that month, we're sharing the 8 components of scouting, 10 things to know about scouting, 6 divisions of scouting, NBA office structure, managing up and managing down, which is very important that people often screw up, quite frankly, and I did as well. I didn't really understand how to manage up when I was a young scout. Mm-hmm. And then the importance of time management. That's all material for month 1. And so this is loaded with content, and we're going to have video chats every month, as well as a monthly quiz at the end of each month. We offer a free quiz, a free trial right now online, where you can go and kind of test your knowledge of basketball and scouting, and you'd be amazed. Right now, I believe the current average, we've had almost 1,000 people take this quiz in the last 2 weeks. It's been a great response. We couldn't be happier, but the average is around 45 percentile correct. So there's a lot to learn. Now, they're not easy questions, not all of them. There's a few easy ones, but there are some hard ones as well. But it lets you know that, it's there's a lot out there, and how we priced it, we hope everyone participates. It's a way we can give back, and we stay in the game and stay involved, and There's also one thing we added is a mentorship program, which I think there's only 2 spots left. We had to limit that to only 20 spots because of my time and my company's time to do appropriate mentoring for people in the industry trying to learn more and understand how this industry, you can really navigate through it. And we're really looking forward to this, though. And then lastly, the third piece of TPG Sports Group at the moment, I told you earlier, we have 90-something things on our whiteboard right now that we're thinking about running, but we just can't do them all.
Yep.
We run a fabulous event in New York City called Sports Tank, and anyone that's watched Shark Tank, it's identical in some ways, where except this is strictly for sports startups. So we identify the top 10 sports startups around the world, and we bring them to New York, and they pitch for 3 minutes in front of a group of 6 venture capitalists in the sports-specific space. And on the other side of the stage are 8 sports executives from all walks. We had the owner of FanDuel there. We had Kevin Pritchard there. We had Tom Shine there. We had Barstool Sports CEO there. We had a lot of different people there to give advice for partnerships as well as there for funding, because these startups need funding. And that's a fun event. You learn so much about the business of sports and the future of sports. It's exciting and it's innovative. We've run that for 3 years now, and it's a lot of fun. It's a little bit of a break for me from the regular basketball, life, and I love it. I learn every year, and we run it, So that's really exciting. We have roughly, Sam, about 250 to 300 on a given year applicants, and we can only choose 10, so it's a very competitive space.
That's amazing. I didn't realize you had that many potential applicants to kind of sort through. That's kind of incredible. How many of these companies would be well known to the general public at large that you guys have helped fund through Sports Tank?
Well, not to the general public necessarily. I'd say there's a few. If you're really deep into it, there's Fizmodo, which is an athlete prevention, an industry, an injury prevention company that's kind of cornered the market, and they're doing a lot of big things. They're based out of Dallas. There's a company called Hook It, which measures the social media presence of athletes and teams, and I believe they're recently working with the Lakers on their patch and what a certain patch value would actually be in terms of that company and being in LA and that sort of thing. And if you could even go on hookit.com and see all of their measures on athletes, and you'd be surprised at some of the athletes that are ranked higher because of their how they're measured versus some of the stars, and vice versa. So it's really interesting.
Pete, is there anything else you want to impart upon people within the TPG Sports Group? Because I really do think that what you guys do is an extremely interesting venture. It's not only helpful for those of you like me who are younger, like I'm 27 years old, and if you're my age or younger looking to break into this industry, you know how difficult it can be. So I think it's great that people like Pete are out there trying to help people along. But also, is there anything else from a technical perspective that you find interesting that, you think could be beneficial to imparting upon the listenership?
Well, first, I just want to thank you for having me. It's always great. You do fantastic work, Sam. And I know you're a rising star in the business. You're a hard worker, and great things are going to happen for you. For your listeners, just check out our website. There's something for everybody. And again, there's a free trial right now on our virtualscoutschool.com, tpgsportsgroup.com for all the basketball folks, Pro Scout School in Vegas. That does sell out every year. I will warn that it does sell out. So if you are interested, make sure you get your ticket early. And we're very open. We have a group of people in our office that we get emails daily on just questions. Please feel free to shoot us an email at info@tpgsportsgroup.com, and either myself personally will get back to you or our Vice President, Charlie Wend. And we're very communicative, and we're here to help. That's basically why we're here, and we enjoy that part of it.
Pete, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. This has been the Game Theory Podcast. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the show on iTunes. It really helps us move up in the ratings. This is coming out, obviously, on Monday, as you've figured out for when you are listening to it. I am on vacation right now currently, so if I'm not getting back to you as quickly as I possibly can, that's why. I apologize for that. I will be back to you next week. Thank you all for listening. I really appreciate it. I'm always humbled by how many people listen to the show. Thank you, and we will talk soon. Bye.